She asked me about the reporting timeline and when reports are due. Basically, I asked her about that because we've got a weird thing where this month on the Miro is like 5 or 6 weeks long. Yeah. We just wanted to clarify when the report was due, and then she said that she was going to talk to you about it.
Okay. I think it was.
I don't think she's going to yell at you, no.
I think it was on the contract, but yeah. Ian's here.
Cool. Oh, you've done.
Oh, guys, sorry.
Again? Long time no see. Are we waiting on others?
His bladder's, he's getting old now. There he is.
Oh, you heard. I was gonna say you should hear the things he's been saying about you the last few minutes, Jamie.
Me? I mean, nothing I haven't heard before, I'm sure.
It's character building.
Very good. Right, is it just us for this one?
Yeah, I think so.
It is on the event.
Great. We should just well, Alex, I'll let you take away. You put the agenda together for this, but I'll just grab Nate as well, make sure he's got the thing for this.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't think this one has to be sort of a full hour. There's just kind of I think we wanted to understand what the kind of rules of engagement are when we're bringing stuff across from the old site to the new. One of the things that I wanted to get a bit of a sense of is when we are designing with a content export import in mind, obviously there are some limitations to what we can design based on what content already exists.
Yeah.
There are some things that we can do. We can hew exactly to what already exists. We can basically say, okay, if there is one image, some text, and a certain category of tag on each of the current posts, then that is what we'll design, because there isn't to be any manual work going back through the archive. On the other end of things, we can say we've got carte blanche. We know that we're introducing new design elements, such as, a table, for example, that won't have been possible before. And therefore, there's going to be some going back through posts, restyling, potentially. When we're laying stuff out, we can make use of either the block editor in WordPress, that bit that appears at the top of the page underneath the title, or we can make use of modules to lay stuff out. Now, you can't automatically import stuff into modules, so that's obviously something that we'll need to bear in mind. I think the first question to ask is, there's a lot of content across the 4 sites. Yeah. How much of it is being brought across? How far back are we going? Is it everything? Or is it going to be the last year's worth? And then a follow-up question to that is, how much of it is then going to be tidied up after the fact? Do you foresee there being any kind of introduction of new, if we're giving you a new module, image libraries, new module for like graphs, tables, how much going back through old stuff do you see there being in terms of tidying it up?
Okay. I mean, in terms of the amount of content, I guess it's understanding what options are available. A bit like an example, on the BBC website, that after a particular, content after a certain period of time is just held in the old format somewhere, I guess, on another server, which I think we'd be happy to do. So I think yeah, a couple of certainly a consideration on the consumer site is SEO, and what effect would any decision have on that? That's pretty important. So looking for a bit of guidance on that. But I don't think, assuming we've still got access to all of it in whatever format, we just sort of draw a line in the sand and say, actually, let's sort of let's bring over content that's less than X time frame old, and think about what we do with that to make sure that it looks good.
Yeah, I mean, we have the resource or the inclination to go back and repurpose old content into a new format. I don't think there's a waste of time really, apart from I guess some of the evergreen content on the consumer side. Case in point is we have an article about what to do with your old £1 coins, which consistently appears as a high achiever in Google for us. Which that it might be a case of cherry picking. I don't know, whatever it is, top 10% or whatever in terms of recurring traffic to old archived material, which we might want to do. But in any case, they editorially kind of refresh it relatively frequently anyway.
There's a couple of things. I think there's a couple of things that we're thinking about. Obviously, you've highlighted one of them, which is the resource is one of the limitations here. I think that it's just worth bearing in mind. I think in terms of the layout, what we probably would do is do what the BBC do, where you've got the old styling for accessing old articles. I don't think that's quite logical, but what we're more likely to do, I would say, is to say, look at maybe for stuff that falls outside of the two thresholds. If we say our two thresholds are how old is it and how often accessed is it, how high performing is it, if it falls outside of those two thresholds, then maybe we say we're just going to bring the text over. Nick, does that set off alarm bells for you at all?
Not especially. So I was thinking probably the basic thing we'd do is just import the content, the main content, just into the main. So you mentioned the WYSIWYG editor at the top rather than mod, so we can just import that there, and we could even do things like just do that and not do anything like featured images or that kind of thing, because obviously if you're going back quite a while, they may not be highest quality. So we could just fall back to a placeholder image for some older content.
That kind of, because obviously the other concern is that we don't want. We were kind of talking earlier about bloating out the database. We don't want to be bringing loads of stuff across, ideally, because you're just going to end up with a huge site. If we could look at stuff that is, let's say, if we effectively rank all of the posts against those two metrics, we'll draw a line in the sand somewhere and say the top 10%, we're going to bring across it all. So we'll bring across a featured image, we'll bring across the text content, etc., and I guess the tags as well. And then stuff that falls in that other 90%, we're just going to bring across the text content or something like that, so that we're being a little bit cautious about bloating the media library out too much.
And Alex, in that 90%, what would an article look like? I.e., would it be aesthetically okay, or would it be punctuated by holes where the images used to be?
So we can bring over images that are part of the content. I'll see. So we can exclude like featured images, for example. We can bring over images that are part of the content. If we didn't, you'd get like a broken image kind of link, like a broken image symbol in the thing. So and that would require manual removal or manual re-adding of an image. So the best thing to do is probably to bring those ones over. just in case. I mean, it depends. Again, it depends how far we go back as to how much we actually bring over.
Yeah. So here we go. So if we look at this, then I've just grabbed any old.
Is it worth at this point also talking about our architecture, guys? Because it strikes me that it was probably not a thing the last time you did this site to bring the majority of this into kind of CDN style S3 kind of ADOS style buckets. But it is much more of a thing now. And it strikes me that if your only intentions are to grow this database to a much broader extent over the next however many years, that would hugely avoid database bloat to get those images in a separate, served via a separate situation.
I don't know where the image
Yeah,
is stored, is it?
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks we have got an S3 server doing something that I'm clearly no expert, but that terminology rings some bells in terms of the existing setup.
It doesn't look like it's.
Okay.
The URL doesn't certainly tell me that it's serving from a CDN, the imagery. Yeah. But
so it might be something that what I don't have a strong idea of is in that porting across of those images, whether it is a sensible process or even a viable process if they are currently served by WordPress to port just the image content into a separate server instance. That we'd look into that rather than making decisions on this call.
But that would be done. That's not how it would be done.
Sorry, you'll know more.
You'd get it all in, and then you'd tell it. Then you'd set the rules at the server level to serve them from elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it would, that decision for us to serve stuff from a CDN would in effect take place after you've already imported it. Is my understanding. So yeah, that wouldn't really be too much of a thing. And even if it's being served by a CDN at the minute, that's not going to stop us from doing the import. I think, I guess it's probably down to us, and it's probably a question that we'll try and solve at the point of finalizing, giving you the sort of discovery report. We'll basically say, okay, this is where we would propose drawing the line in the sand. And this is what we would have for both of those things. In terms of what they would look like, it would look like a text-based, fairly straightforward article. Like Nick says, you wouldn't have the featured image. I wonder if we could do something a little bit just to sort of soften that blow. It might be worth exploring. I don't know whether Nick or Nath, it might be possible. I'm just thinking, for example, if we're looking at an article on your mortgage, for argument's sake, that was under the buy to let category when it's brought across, that we could have a different fallback featured image for different categories, or something like that, just to sort of lessen that blow slightly.
Just a generic fallback picture, or
rather than it being just a your mortgage one, it would be a buy to let one or something like that.
So that wouldn't really be done as part of like the content migration as such. That would be something that we would do in the theme code. So we could create a few different placeholder thumbnails for the different categories and stuff, and then we can do the checks in the code to serve those and have them different. That's definitely possible. It wouldn't really be something that as long as the categories are brought across, that's all we need to worry about in terms of that, and then we can do that in the code after.
Yeah, but what that does do is it helps us make a decision about how much we are going to bring, how many featured images we are going to bring across, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to draw a line in the sand as to whether a whole article is brought across plus imagery.
I mean,
or whether it's
just thinking out loud, if I'm being brutally honest, I think we use too much imagery on the site anyway. On the consumer side specifically, because it just has an impact on load speed and viewability of the content on the page. To consider in terms of future design. I mean, I know it looks nice, but practicalities of it.
It's not something we hear very often.
Don't make it a necessity, I don't think.
Well, that's interesting, because that's also something that, even again, we are slightly moving away from a migration question, but that is something that a variable thumbnail would help with, right? If you're just picking a featured image for the sake of it, I'm seeing a lot of stock imagery of stacks of pound coins and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
If there was a fallback option that actually looked good and worked, then that would help you. You're not going to be looking for another one. Okay. That makes sense. And so, just to clarify then, there's another kind of follow-up question there, which is kind of related. One of the things that we'll often see when we are doing a project such as this is that we might be introducing things like new taxonomies. And I'll give you a kind of hypothetical example. Let's say, for example, when we're looking at mortgage solutions. Let's do your mortgage. I'll share my screen so we can see what we're talking about. Obviously, each of the pieces of content is going to be tagged to one of these. Now, this is a hypothetical, and I'm not suggesting we're going to do this, but it's useful in terms of thinking about how we're going to, what I'm asking. Let's say that we decide these aren't right. These actually aren't the right categories, and we want to change those up. That will mean that in order for it to work properly, each of these is going to need retagging, because this one is tagged specialist mortgages. That's the kind of thing that we'll often run into when we're talking about a website which has a big import or export consideration. Another way of thinking about it is, let's say that we introduce another kind of taxonomy. So let's say we introduce, I don't know, a must-read taxonomy, or you've got 3 different levels of must-read, important info, whatever it might be. If that's a new dimension that we've not used before, then obviously nothing will be tagged in that way when we bring it across, and there's going to have to be some degree of manual tagging in order to do it. Is there resource appetite for something like that, or should we just say, in terms of taxonomical considerations, we're leaving it as is?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the hierarchy of the taxonomy, I don't envisage any major change in mortgage and money in terms of maybe the headline tagging. Where there is an appetite to change is in lower down the hierarchy. So like when you click on hover over the how-to guides and news, I think we want to change.
So it's worth saying then that,
but if you're from a chain perspective, anything in buy to let news would always revert back to buy to let.
Yeah, that's okay. So let's say that do you have a sense, just for the sake of the conversation, as what they want?
Yeah, I think let me try and dig it out. I think it was more for your money that we sort of redid the taxonomy, but I'll have to dig it out.
It would have been in the original documentation that we sent over from '93. I think there was a.
Yeah, I guess for clarity, mortgage solutions, specialist lending solutions staying the same. But as Jamie says, money and mortgage, we wanted to move away from this how-to guides and news. But let me dig that out.
I'm not actually 100% whether that was in that set of documents or whether we discussed that separately.
What I think the important thing to bear in mind there is that when we do an export of this, it will be there. Because obviously everything's tagged like that at the minute, and when we do an import, everything will be tagged with that second level. If specialist mortgages is topic, then how to is let's call it theme. They will all be tagged to a theme that currently exists.
Yeah.
And either we do away with it, in which case, fine, doesn't matter, we can just remove that column, or we are changing it. Now, if how to and the new one has a direct correlative, that is everything that was tagged to how to is now the new one, we can work that out in the code base. If it's not, and there are 4, 5, 6 themes, then there's no getting away from that. That's a manual job.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
Which is just worth, I guess, flagging at the now, because there's going to be some resource needed to be aligned to that. Now, one of the things we can do is say we can look again at this question of lines in the sand. If we want to say that the top 10% do get manually reassigned all of those, and the bottom 90% maybe don't in the initial instance, but we work our way through it, and it's a slow burn job. Someone spends an hour every Friday going through and tagging them. Not the end of the world, right? It's not going to hamper anyone's experience too much, but yeah, it's just worth flagging at the moment that will need to be a manual job. Okay.
Just for reference, I have found a document that was referenced from the discovery questionnaire, but I can't access this at the moment, and it would be one I haven't been able to look at. I imagine that you guys' emails have access. If you just share that to us.
Okay. Yeah.
I'll dig it out.
This line in the sand concept, I think it is, as my understanding is that is generally considered best practice. With a site that is very much focused on the here and now, i.e. it being a news provider, quite a lot of the largest sites out there, when they go through this type of migration, don't even bother going back in time at all, and it's only a case of the stuff that goes live as of today is in a new format, because it's if you think about the curve of people accessing this old content, you're getting probably 90% of people accessing content from today, maybe 70% this week. But by the time it's a month old, you're probably at 2-3% of the content being actually accessed, and by the time it's 6 months old, you're probably a fraction of a percent. That's me conjecturing rather than giving direct data from analytics, but that's what I'm imagining to be the case. So while it might feel pressured to make everything that is being realistically accessed going forwards in the new template, I think probably you're going to be being too hard on yourselves if you want to be thinking, well, actually, we want to make sure that everything for the last 6 months is up to date, because I don't think that your users would expect that. I think that certainly it makes sense to do stuff going forwards. It makes sense to look at even just maybe your top 20 performing articles and do those. And then if there is anything else that performs relatively well that you want to do over time, then it's just a case of update those on a kind of as and when you can basis. Don't know what people's thoughts are on this.
I largely agree. Yeah, I think that's kind of makes complete sense, as long as we can back it up with some evidence from GA or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is probably then URL structures. Actually, what was that example I was just looking at, because that might answer my question. Yeah. So again, then the URLs are going to change by the sounds of it, because we've got guides here. So I guess one thing that we just wanted to get aligned is where the burden falls on redirects. Some clients we work with we will set up a redirects map and handle all of the redirects. Some clients we work with, they do it as part of the content work. I guess I just wanted to know what your thoughts are there.
Probably you.
It's not been kind of big on our radar, I don't think, in terms of a decision that we have to make. So yeah, again, it's guidance from you in terms of what's most efficient.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too bad. I mean, one of the things I'm interested in is getting a bit of input from an SEO perspective about the slugs and how they're working at the minute, because if there's opportunity to improve them, then maybe we'll look at doing that. But it's a big job. That's a big old job. Someone going through and SEO optimizing all of the slugs of all of the old content.
I did run a crawl from SEMrush, but it maxed out on our current plan at 20,000 pages. So that was just your money. In terms of the again, I think it is one of those cases of diminishing returns. You focus on the here and now, the most relevant, the most up to date content, and then you if there are some automatic fixes you can apply to all the stuff you do, but I think it's going to be it makes Sisyphus look like he's having a good time, basically, in terms of going through all those old things. It would be never ending.
Okay, that's fine. I think final question then. Oh no, I've covered it. It's categorizations of posts. I think that's all my questions. Are there any other sort of remaining questions that you might have, Nick or Nath?
Not from my. I think my question. We kind of covered my main wondering earlier on as to whether or not there would be potentially a cut-off either in terms of age of posts, or just cherry picking some really like high performing pages as to what we bring over, just to kind of help with keep the database bloat down a bit. But we've kind of.
Are you talking about literally what is brought over, Nick, as opposed to what is restyled?
Yeah. So what rather than restyling, like what would is there any scope for if, like, let's say some pages are say 7, 8, 9 years old and they're not getting much traction, do they need to be brought across? It was kind of just a one, because obviously if there's some posts that some content that we can just leave or put somewhere else, then obviously that will help keep things a bit neater with the new site.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I guess because I'm assuming the archive for something like Your Money and Mortgage Solutions goes back to
10 years.
Day dot. Yeah, like probably more than that. I don't really know.
The oldest stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, because people I'm thinking about Mortgage Solutions in particular. People in our industry have been around in the industry a long time, and there will be sort of reference points through time that they'll be interested in. And actually, sometimes we do reference. I can't think of a specific example, but let's say, off the back of the mini budget, there was a reference to the last time interest rates rose by such a significant amount, link back to a story from 2008.
This is the thing. I mean, I bring I've just searched Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. Yeah, the BBC News article from 2008 is still there. And because you are a news provider, there is a kind of archival.
Yeah, I don't think, unless you say otherwise, I don't think I'd like to get rid of anything. It's more, how do we?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I was just wondering.
Place, that is efficient.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was more wondering, is if we are going to be bringing everything over, then we'll look at a way of potentially trying to split it up a bit, so like older posts may potentially live somewhere else, but we'll need to work that side of things out. But yeah, that was my main kind of question, really, because sometimes I've transferred sites over and the old content, they've just been like, we're not really that fussed about it, so just go back to a certain year and then leave it. But it's no problem if we're going to do it all. It was just
a challenge, though, isn't it? Because like probably 90% of that archive is just irrelevant. But
and that's kind of the
10%, like finding a
that was kind of what led me to ask the question, was like, if let's say 90% of it is irrelevant, is that something that if we're starting afresh, is that something that you want to be bringing over and potentially causing bloat in the database and taking up server space? So it's just kind of
I don't know how you search that. How you search that out, though? How do you?
The problem with that, though, if you start removing old legacy content, you're going to run into a lot of 404 errors. And you're going to have to put redirects in for all those ones you remove, and
Yeah.
that might have an SEO impact as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that's why I'm inclined towards bringing across all of just the text content, because the comparative level of bloat to the database is much, much less, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would suggest that's the way to go.
Yeah, it feels like
that's fine. Yeah, that was kind of my main wondering anyway.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, and from an editorial perspective, we are a public record as well, and not what I'm saying. We do cover some contentious issues like fraud and individuals that have done X, Y, and Z, and we would need access to that. I mean, I know we probably could access it through the CMS or whatever, but removing stuff, I think potentially, albeit very small, could provide a risk.
Yeah, it's not a problem either way. It was just something I was wondering about. Either way is fine. So we'll be able to work something out.
All right, great.
Okay then. Any further questions for anyone then?
No, I'll dig out that taxonomy and forward it round.
That's great, thank you.
Great. Once you've shared access to that article as well, we can look through what was proposed previously. Okay, great. Let's leave it there then. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Thank you. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.